In the fading light of a London afternoon, where the stones of Buckingham Palace hold centuries of stories, a single salute bridged the gap between past and present, weaving a tapestry of emotion that left onlookers in tears. Arthur Reynolds, an 85-year-old war veteran, stood before a royal guard, his trembling hand raised in honor. What followed was not just a gesture, but a profound exchange of respect, duty, and shared sacrifice. A moment that transformed a routine day into a legacy of heart and humility. This is the story of how one man's quiet tribute sparked a ripple of reverence, reminding us all of the values that endure beyond time. The sun dipped low over Buckingham Palace, its golden rays painting the cobblestone courtyard in hues of amber and shadow. Tourists buzzed like bees, their cameras flashing, their voices a symphony of wonder at the palace's grandeur. The royal guards, iconic in their scarlet tunics and towering bearskin hats, stood as living statues, their discipline a silent testament to Britain's storied past. Amid this vibrant scene, one figure stood apart, Arthur Reynolds, a Royal Navy veteran whose 85 years had etched deep lines of courage and loss into his weathered face. His navy blue coat, though faded, was pressed with care, and the medals on his chest gleamed, each a chapter of valor from wars long past. Beside him walked his grandson, 12-year-old Liam, whose wide eyes drank in the spectacle. Liam had always known his grandfather was special, but here, in the shadow of history, he felt it deeply. "Grandpa," he whispered, tugging at Arthur's hand, "are they real soldiers?" Arthur's chuckle was soft, like the rustle of autumn leaves. "Aye, lad," he said, his voice thick with memory, "real as they come. They stand here just as we once did." His gaze settled on a young guard, no older than 25, standing rigid with a rifle at his side, his face unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Arthur's steps slowed as they approached the guard. The crowd, sensing something profound, parted instinctively. This was no ordinary tourist. This was a man whose life had been shaped by service, whose medals told of nights in the Atlantic, of comrades lost to the sea, of moments when duty outweighed fear. Liam clung to his grandfather's hand, his small frame vibrating with curiosity. Arthur's cane, which he rarely used, rested lightly against the stones as he squared his shoulders, the weight of age giving way to the posture of a soldier. With a trembling but deliberate motion, he raised his right hand in a salute, crisp and perfect despite the years. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The guard, whose name was Corporal Thomas Bennett, remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward, his rifle steady, trained to embody discipline. Thomas was a statue of duty, unmoved by the distractions of tourists or the chaos of the world beyond the palace gates. Yet something in his gaze flickered, a subtle shift, like a candle catching flame. He saw Arthur's medals, the faded coat, the unwavering hand. He saw not just an old man, but a brother in arms, a soldier, whose battles had paved the way for his own. The crowd fell silent, their chatter replaced by a hush of anticipation. A young woman in a red coat wiped a tear, her phone forgotten in her hand. A man with a veteran's pin on his lapel stiffened, his own memories stirred. Even the palace security, ever watchful, leaned closer, their usual detachment softened by the weight of the moment. Arthur's arm trembled, the ache of age creeping in, but his salute held firm, a bridge across decades. Liam's eyes darted between his grandfather and the guard. His breath caught in awe. Thomas's breathing slowed, a subtle sign of the conflict within. His training demanded stillness, an unyielding adherence to protocol. To move, to acknowledge, was to break the sacred code of the guard. Yet the man before him was no tourist demanding a photo or a reaction. This was a veteran, his medals a map of sacrifice, his salute a language Thomas understood in his bones. The crowd waited, their collective breath held, as the silence stretched like a taut wire. Then, with the precision of a soldier and the heart of a man, Thomas moved. His white-gloved hand rose, returning the salute with a crispness that echoed through the courtyard. The crowd gasped, a wave of disbelief and reverence rolling through them. It was a gesture brief in time, but vast in meaning. A soldier honoring a soldier, a young man paying tribute to a legacy. Arthur's lips trembled, his eyes glistening with tears, not of sorrow, but of pride. He lowered his hand slowly, his chest rising with the weight of the moment. In a voice barely audible, he whispered, "Thank you, lad." Thomas lowered his salute, his face still unreadable, and resumed his stance, rifle at his side, posture flawless. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed, but to those who witnessed it, everything had. The exchange was no performance, no tourist spectacle. It was a silent vow, a recognition of shared duty that transcended generations. Liam gripped his grandfather's hand tighter, his voice a hushed marvel. "Grandpa, did he really salute back?" Lad," Arthur murmured, a single tear tracing the lines of his face. "He did." The crowd erupted into soft applause, hesitant at first, then swelling with emotion. Some wiped tears, others stood in quiet respect. A few veterans in the crowd raised their own salutes, a silent nod to a brotherhood that time could not erode. Arthur took a slow breath, letting the moment settle into his soul. He had come to honor the new generation, to stand before them as he had once stood before his own comrades. But he had received something more, a gift of recognition he hadn't sought, but would carry forever. As the applause faded, Arthur turned to Liam, his eyes twinkling with a mix of nostalgia and wisdom. "You see, lad," he said, "we don't salute for show. We salute for those who never came home." Liam's gaze softened, his young mind grappling with the depth of his grandfather's words. He reached out, his small fingers brushing Arthur's medals, as if touching history itself. "Did they salute you back then, Grandpa?" he asked. Arthur's chuckle was warm, carrying the weight of a lifetime. "No, lad. Back then, we saluted for the ones we lost, not for ourselves." The boy nodded, something shifting within him, a seed of understanding that would grow with time. The moment was no longer just a salute. It was a lesson, a memory that would linger long after they left the palace. But the story doesn't end with the salute. As Arthur and Liam walked away, the crowd parting in reverence, the moment rippled outward, touching lives beyond the courtyard. Thomas Bennet, back at his post, felt the weight of the exchange settle into his heart. At 25, he was a soldier forged in modern conflicts, his own tours in the Middle East, a fresh chapter in the Guard's storied legacy. The salute he'd given wasn't just for Arthur, but for all who'd worn the uniform before him. In the quiet of his barracks that evening, Thomas wrote a letter to his sister describing the veteran's salute and the pride it stirred. "It's why we stand," he wrote, "not for the crowds, but for the ones who stood before us." The crowd carried the moment with them. 2. The young woman in the red coat, a history student named Clara, shared the story on her blog, her words capturing the raw emotion of the exchange. Her post went viral, sparking discussions about duty and respect across social media. A retired colonel in the crowd, moved by Arthur's dignity, reached out to his old regiment, organizing a reunion to honor veterans like Arthur, whose stories often went untold. Even the palace security, hardened by years of routine, spoke of the moment in their break room. One, admitting it was the first time he'd felt tears on duty. For Arthur, the days that followed were a quiet reflection. Back at his modest home in Kent, he sat with Liam, recounting stories of the war. Not the glorified tales of victory, but the human ones, the friend who'd shared his last cigarette, the letter from home that kept him going, the silence of a ship after a battle. Liam listened, his video games forgotten, his admiration for his grandfather deepening. "Will I be a soldier like you, Grandpa?" he asked one evening, his voice earnest. Arthur smiled, his hand resting on Liam's shoulder. "You don't need a uniform to be a soldier, lad. You live with honor. You stand for what's right. That's enough." The words were simple, but they planted a seed in Liam, one that would guide him through school debates, community service, and eventually a career in teaching where he'd share his grandfather's lessons with a new generation. Arthur's life, though nearing its twilight, took on new purpose. He began speaking at local schools, not as a hero, but as a man who'd learned the cost of freedom. His medals, once tucked away in a drawer, were displayed at a veterans museum, where visitors read of his service in the Atlantic convoys, his bravery under fire, his quiet return to civilian life. Each visitor left with a piece of Arthur's story, a reminder that valor isn't always loud. It's often in the steady hand of a salute. Months later, a letter arrived at Arthur's home, forwarded by the palace. It was from Thomas Bennet, written in careful, deliberate script. "Sir," it began, "your salute reminded me why I serve. Your service, your sacrifice, is the foundation we stand on. Thank you." Arthur read the letter alone, his eyes misting. He didn't reply, not out of pride, but because he knew the true response had already been given in that courtyard. In the silent language of soldiers, the story of Arthur and Thomas spread, not as a spectacle, but as a beacon. In veterans' halls, in classrooms, in quiet conversations. It reminded people of the values that endure, respect earned through sacrifice, honor forged in service, duty that binds generations. Clara's blog post inspired a documentary, The Salute, which followed veterans like Arthur, weaving their stories with those of young soldiers like Thomas. The film premiered at a London festival where Arthur, frail but proud, received a standing ovation, Liam at his side, beaming. Years later, when Arthur passed quietly at 89, his funeral was small but profound. Liam, now a young man, wore one of Arthur's medals pinned to his suit. Among the mourners was a familiar face, Thomas Bennet, no longer a guard, but a captain, his own medals gleaming. He saluted Arthur's coffin, a final tribute from one soldier to another. Liam, fighting tears, returned the salute, closing the circle begun that day at Buckingham Palace. This story, sparked by a single act of emotion, challenges us to look beyond the surface. When have we dismissed a uniform as mere ceremony, or a gesture as routine? The Royal Guard, standing through centuries, reminds us that every salute carries a story, every moment of discipline a legacy. Arthur's salute and Thomas's response show that honor isn't confined to battlefields. It lives in the quiet acts that connect us. What would you have done in Thomas's place? Could you have broken protocol to honor a veteran, or stood firm in duty? Share your thoughts. For every uniform holds a history, every salute a promise, and every moment, no matter how fleeting, a chance to stand for something greater.